and welcome to another edition of Montpelier Connection. I'm State Representative Mike Berwicki, and here we are with Representative Matt Trieber of Rockingham. It's getting towards the end of the session here at the State House. We've just finished another long day on the floor. We're starting to debate bills that have come over from the Senate, looking at bills that we've sent over there and then they've sent back. So we're in that stage where the end game has started, and sometimes they call that the horse trading of the conference committees. We're both on House Human Services Committee, and Matt, you did a lot of work on a bill where we were looking to try and help people out of poverty by making work pay. Can you share with us a little bit about the process and all the work you did to get to what I consider one of the better bills we've done this year?
Thank you. If I can, I'll go back a little bit to say that one of the issues that we've had with our safety net programs is the concept of making sure that they actually do what they're supposed to, which is to help people become self-sustainable so they can move out of poverty. Unfortunately, when you look at the way the programs have been implemented and work over time, you see that there's actually a perverse disincentive to work built into them. It's called the benefits cliff. And essentially what happens is, as you begin to work, your benefits get pulled away at such a rate that the incentive is not to work. So you find low-income Vermonters doing things that seem horrific financially, turning down jobs, sometimes turning down additional hours, raises, promotions, things like that. And these are the issues that we deal with and have been dealing with for years in the Human Services Committee. So I know you know all this already.
No, this is great background because it's not simple, and it's there's a lot behind the story.
Yeah. And I think that one of the other issues that you run up against is whenever you try to make a new or to adjust the programs to try to fix this problem, it tends to be fairly costly. And so programs that aren't revenue neutral in this environment usually die. So to adjust this program accordingly, I really wanted to find a way where we could do it in a revenue neutral way so that we didn't have additional costs and so it could actually move forward. And
so who is it we're trying to help here?
This particular subset that we were looking at, the reach-up population, which is also known as the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families group, it's parents with children who are low income. So it's not for people without children or anything like that. Basically, the program as it's set up in Vermont is a cash benefit to people to help them with their basic needs, and it's set up off a formula of the basic needs budget that does not come close to being enough for a person to survive, but it's meant to aid in that way in a cash benefit system. So what this program, or what the bill did, is it took a portion of that benefit and it looked at where other states have seen increase in work participation, increase in people moving out of poverty. And I spent a lot of time going through reports from different states and sort of comprehensive programs or reports on how different states implement their TANF programs to try to come up with a system that we could take some aspects from to try to improve our work participation rate. Our program as it exists now, it solely consists of a cash benefit. And unfortunately, the results that we've seen from that have not been as good as other states that have implemented additional programs. So what the bill did is it took the portion from the cash benefit side and transferred that to be able to buy additional programs to allow people to keep more of what they earn and to save money. The thought process being that if you're trying to help a low-income Vermonter become self-sustainable, what better way than to allow them to see that as you start to work, the state's going to support you and not strip your benefits away so you can keep more of what you earn. And you can also start to create your own financial safety net by creating more of a savings account to deal with emergencies. Because ultimately, the goal of our safety net program is to be there so that people don't fall through the cracks. No one wants to see people fall into abject poverty without help. But at the same time, the ideal is for people to be able to start to build their own safety net and not necessarily need to avail themselves of that. And so savings,
a car,
a work history, a car. I mean, well, a car isn't necessarily considered assets as it is, but from the amount that's currently allowed is $2,000, and it doesn't take. When you look at a winter like the one we just had, it's not difficult for any Vermonter to understand or to see a scenario where, when you're a single parent with a child, how you may need more than $2,000 to deal with things like a heating bill or car repairs to the potholes or things like that. So to try to increase that amount was, I think, really necessary to achieve the goals.
From your perspective, you did a lot of work on this. How did it turn out from where you hoped it would go and where it landed?
I actually was surprised with the way a lot of it worked. I think that, whenever you implement a program that is somewhat, or whenever you propose something that is somewhat controversial, and people weren't necessarily in love with the funding mechanism of this, and it is new, and people always worry about preserving what the existing is and are hesitant to implement something new. But I was very surprised in our committee to see it come out with only one person on the committee in opposition, to have support from Democrats, Republicans, even a progressive there, and even more surprised to see when it went to the full House floor, I believe it received a vote of 141 to 4. So it had very broad support, despite being, I think, in some ways, if you didn't quite understand the entire concept, sort of a difficult thing to really see the benefits of.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head in terms of, for years we've been trying to figure out how do we give people incentives and smooth out those cliff benefits so somebody doesn't have to choose between food and childcare and working or taking a better job. And that's the reality some people were up against, in that it didn't pay to work in some instances, especially for a parent who's really concerned about their presence in their children's lives and trying to be as dedicated to being a parent as they could be. So I think this resonated for a lot of people who sincerely want to help people out of poverty, and often in these cases it's single mothers who have been abandoned by the fathers of their children, whose fathers don't really participate in financially raising their children. So you did some good work here, and I will say, given a little bit more to the backstory, when you initially put this proposal out, there's 11 members on our committee, and I think the first straw poll we took, the vote was 6-5. And I saw you worked a little more with people. By the time we got to that vote, like you said, it was 10-1, which is a testament to your work, your being willing to work with people, and with all sides to this. I know you worked with advocates who were a little slow to come to the table, but I think eventually saw this long-term is a good thing, and where we want to go and helping people help themselves.
And we did try to, in crafting what the final result was, I did try to bring in concepts that were brought to me by low-income advocates, by people of all the different parties, to try to figure out exactly where we could get. The bottom line is, and I think the reason that we ended up in the vote that we had, is that overall, all of our goals, regardless of which political party, are the same, which is to help people move out of poverty. And I said from the beginning, and I think a lot of people feel the same way, that our goal as a state needs to be to remove as many barriers as we can. And this benefits cliff has consistently and perennially been one of the largest barriers that we've seen.
Yeah. I think we'll see how this goes. As I said before, we are late in the session, and sometimes the wild card when we pass something in the House is how is it going to fare in the Senate. So have you been following the bill in the Senate?
I have been trying to, while trying to also be respectful of that body's ability to change things. So I've been following it, but not to the extent of being the House member sitting in the room.
Yeah.
I have heard that it will be passed out soon. How it comes out is unknown. But I think that overall there is an understanding of the direction that the House wanted to go with it, and also an understanding that no one wanted this bill to be punitive to recipients of the program. The goal has always been to try to take it, to not cost taxpayers anything, to make it revenue neutral, but to make the maximum amount of benefit. And anything the Senate, I know there's an interest in the Senate in strengthening the idea of not hurting Vermonters by low-income Vermonters through the funding mechanism, and to strengthen the language behind that, I think is a good thing.
Yeah. And usually when the House votes something out with such a strong vote, 140 to 4, that's a message to the Senate that this is something it's really important to us. So we'll see how it goes. And it is going back to the governor's State of the State address back in January. This is something he's talked about, where he's recognized benefit cliffs. In past years, I know he's told the story of the mom who had to turn down a promotion at work because it meant she'd get more money and then lose child care and all and some of her other benefits.
Unfortunately, the governor hasn't come along with this proposal yet, but we're hoping that he'll get there.
We'll see. Well, hopefully can remind him of that, and how I think he has been supportive of this, and it is revenue neutral. I don't think it really impacts the budget in a way, except the reality is eventually it can help get people off of assistance and back on their own feet. Well, in Human Services Committee, we've worked on a number of bills this year. We're working on bills that are coming over from the Senate now. One of them we heard a lot of testimony on yesterday has to do with another piece of the governor's plan, which is how to address the different aspects of the growing drug problem here in Vermont, the opiate drug, heroin problem. As the governor said in his State of the State, we can't arrest our way out of this problem. And what we're finding out is at the time of arrest, though, sometimes is the time we have the most leverage to get people into treatment. And the early intercept model is something we've been looking at. Any thoughts on whether this is the right direction to go?
Well, first, I think, I really want to commend Governor Shumlin for taking a holistic view of this issue.
Yeah.
I think that through that, it's going to help us through this epidemic. I know that my community of Bellows Falls has seen a huge uptick in heroin use, as many have, but, being a population center of Windham County, we see it. And I think that by taking the holistic approach that the governor's taken of increasing money towards treatment, increasing access to treatment, some of the bills that we worked on last year related to, metals theft and things like that, all help. But I agree wholeheartedly that the idea of when someone has the blue lights flashing behind them is sort of a great time for them to decide that rehab and getting out of that life is the way for them to go. And I also think it's kind of important that Governor Shumlin has carved out a very strong distinction between users and dealers. Because there's a huge difference to me, and I think in our communities, from victims of addiction who have found themselves in a situation of being addicted to an opiate versus people who see a financial opportunity by transporting a substance like heroin from New York to to Vermont to make more of a profit and to addict more of our citizens.
Yeah. I think another distinction that we heard is that these opportunities to get into rehab instead of jail are not available for violent offenders. People who are robbing people by force with weapons to get money for their drugs are not eligible for these programs.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we make a distinction that the safety of Vermonters really does come first, and we don't tolerate violence. I think it's important for people to know we're not just opening the doors of the prisons and letting people go into rehab. This is for people who are addicted, who want to get better, who understand that addiction is not curable, but it's treatable. It's a day-to-day proposition, and they need lots of help for it, and taking that first step. But it's not for violent offenders, so just to make clear to the people out there, it's not an open door that we're trying to do.
Well, and study after study has shown that if you really want to get people, if you really want to help addicts out, you want to move them out of the, you want to start to transition them towards recovery. Prison does not do that. And like you said before, there are clear instances when jail is the appropriate response. People dealing the substance, violent offenders, people robbing, people with force, things like that. But when you're talking about nonviolent drug offenders, the idea of trying to have an intervention outside of that prison system has been shown to be more effective and ultimately costs the state substantially less money in dealing with the problem.
Yeah.
It's cheaper to treat someone than to incarcerate.
You bet. I mean, that's a win-win, I think. And we heard testimony yesterday from somebody who, has been living that experience, and I think it was very compelling to hear them speak to really wanting to quit, to face their addiction, but needing the supports to get out of that culture. Because if you're looking for drugs, you hang around with those people, and that's where the trouble. People get into trouble with some of the dealers that they then start hanging around with.
And this individual had gone so far as to, his major push at this point was starting a Narcotics Anonymous branch in his community to try to help other people. So, the people that he knows, his people in his community, he was trying to give back at this point.
Yeah, that's a
great story.
I look at that as the wounded healer concept, where trying to heal others and help others, we can help ourselves as well. I wish him well and all the people that are really serious about facing their challenges. As we're heading towards the home stretch, is there anything else you're really keeping your eye on? Road money to help rebuild our roads after this winter, or?
Well, road money is always a concern. We always like to see money coming back into our districts that go that go up to Montpelier. It's nice to see them come back at some point. And I know that they've had conversations around here. I was upset or disappointed again that we were unable to reach a deal with New Hampshire over the Vilas Bridge, which has been an unfortunate closure for Bellows Falls and probably the largest issue.
Was I correct in hearing that Vermont was ready to offer some money to contribute to that?
Well, I believe that we always had to contribute some money to it.
Yeah.
My understanding that the last proposal that went to the state of New Hampshire was to do some infrastructure work that New Hampshire needed us to do, and we were going to do that in exchange for their commitment to fix the Vilas Bridge. Unfortunately, the Live Free or Die state doesn't really like to fix bridges necessarily. So
I know it's important to Brattleboro because it's a bridge they're waiting on to get fixed as well, and I hope we can come to some accord with New Hampshire over these bridges.
Well, it would be nice, when they won the Supreme Court decision to own the river and the bridges. There are ramifications to that, and I think it's a lesson to all of us of why it's important to maintain our infrastructure. So while those gas taxes that we pay at the pump may be painful, especially after winter like this, you can see why they're necessary.
You bet. And I know one thing I really give Governor Shumlin credit for, since he took office, we've seen a lot more road and bridge construction, reconstruction, the interstate bridges, even though we've been having some snafus with traffic around that. They're long overdue to undertake the replacement of the I-91 bridges over the West River. All around the state, we've been putting a lot into our infrastructure because we understand commerce doesn't happen without that.
Well, 91 and 89 are two of our biggest drivers in commerce, so it's good to maintain.
Yeah. Got a few minutes left. Anything else you want to mention?
Not really. We've just been, following all the bills that we sent over. We've sent over a bunch. We have a few coming up between the marijuana dispensaries bill, and we'll have to see what comes back over from the Senate.
Yeah. Well, thanks a lot for taking some time.
Yeah. Thank you, Mike.
And thanks for sharing the work on House Human Services Committee.
Well, thanks.
And thanks again to all the people back at BCTV and at Fact TV in Bellas Falls, who I understand picks up this feed. Is that Channel 8 over there?
I don't have cable.
Oh, you don't have cable?
But I believe it is Channel 8.
Good. But anyway, I understand BCTV and Fact TV both run this. So thanks to all the people back there who are helping bring the work here at the State House closer to home. Until then, this is Mike Berwicki. Take care.